I clearly remember the day that I sat down with my Master Chief and told him that I was going to get out of the Navy. And he said, "It's about time you told me." And about a week later, I was selected for promotion to Chief Petty Officer. And everyone thought that I was going to stay in. They were like, "Oh my God, well, you can't get out now. You made Chief." And I was like, "Uh-huh. Um, thanks." And just went about my business. Um, they I decided to go through with chief initiation. If you're a part of the Navy, you know that that's like a really big deal. Um, and I was on leave for the first 9 days, I think, helping my family do some work on their house before winter hit because they live like way up north in Michigan and it just needed to be done. And that was more important. And then I came back, so I finished out the last 5 weeks, 4.5, 5 weeks of initiation. Yeah, it was a good time. um, but yeah, I left the Navy at my 10-year mark and I don't regret it at all. I knew with every bone in my body that that was the right move to do, regardless of the success that I had achieved in a short amount of time in my military career. So today I wanted to discuss a few of the reasons why I left the Navy. It was kind of a slow realization and almost like heartbreak that I needed to leave the military. Um, I joined at 18. I grew up in Ohio, so I don't know, kind of joined as like a naive 18-year-old that hadn't really experienced much life yet. I thought life would be rainbows and butterflies when I got to my first duty station, and it was not quite that. Um, Amazing first duty station, don't get me wrong. But you have to grow up really quick and just in a different way in the military. Um, I didn't know anything about health insurance or uh buying a car. The Navy told me where to be, what time to be there, and what clothes to wear when I got there. And they fed me, so I literally didn't have to adult, I guess, but I did have to grow up mentally and as a person and not let outside influences change who I was at my core. So that was like a struggle, but anyway, um so I got to my first ship in San Diego and it was amazing. I guess as good as sea duty could be, but it was really fun. We had such a good group of people. Really felt like a nice tight knit family. I picked up rank quickly. I got thrown into a lot of challenging leadership positions very early in my career. I was on year 3 in the Navy, and I was an E-5, and so a petty officer second class, and I was made the LPO of my division, which is like typically an E6 job, and we just didn't have anyone, and I was 20. I wasn't even old enough to drink. Yeah, I hadn't turned 21 yet. Wasn't old enough to drink, and I was leading 30-year-olds. It was crazy and very intimidating. I think for how new I was in the Navy, I did the best that I could, and I did pretty good considering the circumstances. And I learned a lot taking me into my next duty station. So I got stationed at Naval Air Station Protect. It's not the most popular base, but I was an air traffic controller, so that is the place to go if you want to excel your career and really hone your ATC skills. And it was kind of like the place that you would go to be if you can control aircraft at PAX, you can control anywhere. And it was definitely the best place to go. And I told myself, I wasn't 100% sure if I wanted to stay in the Navy. So I was like, let me get orders to PAX because it's also in Maryland. Not many people want to go here. And it was the closest duty station to my hometown in Ohio. So I was in San Diego for almost 4 years. I was like, fine, I'll go back, be close to family. And try this air traffic control thing out, like, for real. And if, like, at the end of my tour, I'll figure out, what do I love more, the Navy or air traffic control? Because if I like ATC more, it did not make sense to stay in the military because the jobs are so, like, lucrative. You can make bank doing air traffic control as a civilian. But if I liked the Navy more and like the leadership aspect and like being part of a team and stuff, then I would stay Navy and try to grow as much as I could, in advance, and like really not just do 20 years, but like really try to make an impact in the Navy. Like I wanted to go big. Um, so I think like the first 3 years, I got here to Maryland in 2018, 19, and like the first half of 2020, I was like, oh, I kind of like this air traffic control thing. Like I'm pretty good at it. I know, like, I just felt really confident in my abilities in controlling aircraft, but I was also thrown into leadership positions like the second I got to Maryland. Just timing, really. There was an opening and I was the, I guess, best person to take the job, or just my timing worked out that I could take a good leadership job. Um, and I was taking college classes, like 2 to 3 classes, while training through air traffic control, which was a lot because I was new. Like ship air traffic control is not the same. So there's a huge learning curve. And even though I got to Maryland as an E6, they expect you to get qualified faster, but I had the experience of a brand new sailor. So there was just a lot of pressure, more so that I put on myself to perform really well. So I was working really hard in 2 to 3 college classes, training, sometimes dual training on like multiple things in the air traffic control world, um, moving to a new area, trying to make friends, and um, also like collateral duties, like extra jobs that I did for the Navy beyond my air traffic control jobs to like help me look good for promotion. And I just really bit off more than I could chew. I sacrificed Kristen in order to have a good evaluation. And so I became the LPO in March of 2020, or maybe February. And that was when the pandemic happened. And, planes don't stop flying. The military doesn't stop just because there's a pandemic. So there were crazy work schedules that we had to work out. There were about 80, mid 80s, like let's say 85 of us. And we would split into 2 crews. So I had about 35 people that I was in charge of and like writing their schedule. And basically, that was the hardest job I have ever done in the military. It was multiple times a day rewriting a whole monthly schedule for 35 people and trying to put 35 people in 14 positions, but only certain people could fill certain positions based on their qualifications. And then if someone had any symptom to do with COVID, which is a laundry list of symptoms, they would go into quarantine. And then all of their close contacts would go into quarantine too. And the protocol would change weekly. The people coming up sick, which is like, we can't get mad at them. It happens. It was everywhere, but it was daily, multiple times a day, contact tracing. And that was all my job. Not only just dealing with like being a leader in the military and just like the day to day, like, oh, someone's late for work, I gotta go talk to them about why they were late and give them like whatever corrective action, and doing my air traffic control job because we were split into quarters, or in half technically. Each crew was split in half, so there were basically 4 crews. So that we had enough people to rotate day and eve and not come in contact with the other day shift. And anyway, it's ridiculous. Just the schedule alone was exhausting. And anytime a new like COVID policy would come out, which was literally weekly. Like they changed, and I get it, like they're learning and everything, but it was a lot to go from, oh, you have to quarantine, to no, you just stay at work and wear a mask and then do a 5-day incubation period and then you go into quarantine. Like it was just so inconsistent. And I was the person explaining and enforcing these policies to my subordinates. So then I'm getting like the backlash from them because they don't agree with this policy that I didn't make up, but I am just the messenger, really. I have to enforce these policies. That's just a part of being a leader in the military. Um, and then I was just kind of getting beat down from both sides because I would try to fight for what I thought was correct to my chain of command. And um, they were just, they were frustrated too with all the changes. And I was just not in a good spot where no matter what I did, I was the bad guy. Um, and it just really got to me after like, it was 18 months of this. Like, it wasn't just the few months that maybe most of America experienced. Like, the Navy was on lockdown for off and on for a year and a half. Like, we didn't get full freedom to eat at a restaurant until summer of 2021. Like, so my work life balance was horrible because I would go to work and then when I was at home, someone else would have COVID or someone else would have symptoms, and or I would get it. And um that is the big breaking point. That's why I stressed about COVID for so long. There was so much on one person's shoulders, and like, yes, I could have asked for help. I did. It just, I won't get into that. But in June of 2021, well, really the beginning of 2021, I started feeling really exhausted, and the tiniest inconvenience would send me into this like emotional spiral where I would go home like crying, and I would have these like panic attacks before I'd go into work because it was just, I couldn't leave my phone for more than 5 minutes because I was scared someone was going to call me and I wouldn't answer. And it would just be, I just did a really bad job at setting boundaries and taking care of myself. And it was weird because I did a lot of like self work to improve my mental health and my like, I think just myself as a person. Like, I really grew, but myself as like from a manager, leader, military aspect, I like neglected that side of me for sure. So I learned how to set like boundaries in my personal life, but I unlearned how to set work boundaries. And I just started like slipping on a lot of little things that I know I would usually that I used to be on top of. Like, just I would miss someone's appointment and then we'd be understaffed for the day, and I would have to go explain to my boss why I missed that. And it's not the end of the world, but it is a very simple mistake that shouldn't have been made. And once I got into once I promoted to chief, that was one of the things that I thought was unacceptable of our LPOs to miss. So I get it. And once I started missing that, I was like, I can't do this. Like, I would beat myself up about it. And I just couldn't. I started getting my threshold for like what I could handle was lowering, and it got so low. So I finally went up to one of my chief's offices and I just broke down. And um, I told them, like, I don't want you to think of me as a quitter, but I can't handle this anymore. And I just kind of vented a little bit about how I was feeling, and they were like, "Okay, take a break. Like, we'll be okay. You need a break. You obviously need a break, so take it." And I was like, "Really? It's that simple?" And they were like, "Yeah." Um and so I just went to work and did air traffic control for 6 months. But also during the pandemic, um, we were on a working every other day schedule, and I started using some of my free time to get into photography more. It had always been a hobby, but I really was like, I have this time. I need to take advantage of it. I told all my sailors, you have all this free time. You should be finishing college classes, going to the gym, like working out, even though they're closed. Like, find a way to make yourself better. And like I said, I made my personal life 10 times better, but my work life suffered drastically. So I just dove into YouTube, like literal, I wish I could count thousands of hours into YouTube, learning how to take photos correctly in manual mode. And um, anyway, that was my hobby, and slowly turned into a business. I became an LLC in 2021, and I started to kind of bite off more than I could chew with balancing photography and my job. But just slowly, I forget who asked me, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And then they said, instead of asking yourself 5 years, where do you see yourself in 7 years? And that was in, I think, the end of 2021. And I just had these like like a, just a mental image, and it was, I wasn't wearing a uniform. I had a camera in my hand, and I was just like, oh my God, this is like, do I really not want to be in the Navy? And once I like said that to myself, it just felt good. And again, like, no bad blood to the Navy at all. It was so good to me. I got my degree. I saved so much money. I learned so much about myself, and um, I made some of the best friends of my entire life in the Navy. But I think I just started to come to this realization that it was time to do something else. And photography just really um, made me happy. And I remember I was photographing a wedding, and my second photographer at the wedding snapped a picture of me smiling at the bride and groom, and I was like giddy smiling. Like, my eyes were watery, and I was just so happy. And then I saw a picture of myself in the Navy, and I just looked like dead. And um I remember when I moved in with my boyfriend, he would say that there's two different Kristens. The Kristen that would come home after a day of work in the Navy, and then a Kristen that would come home after doing something photography related. And he was like, I want the photography Kristen. And I was like, I do too. um, but yeah, and slowly the Navy just started to feel like it was getting in the way of photography, which, like, I can't not do the Navy until my time is up. So August 18th, actually, of 2022, I told my Master Chief that I was going to leave the Navy, which I had already talked about, which, funny enough, became my terminal leave start date in 2023. So August 18th, 2023 was my last day of work in the Navy. And I didn't plan that at all. It just happened to work that way. But yeah, and then September, I don't remember the date in 2022, like the first week of September. Oh, it was September 7th, actually, because that was my 9-year Navy anniversary. I found out I made chief, and I was on my way up to Michigan to visit my family when they called me. And the command master chief called me with the CO and XO of the base, so the commanding officer, and the career counselor, who's the person that handles like reenlistment paperwork. And he was like, so Chief Select, now that you have been selected for Chief Petty Officer, are you ready to submit your reenlistment paperwork? And the captain said that, actually, and I was like, oh, sir, I just need to take some time to think about it, but thank you for asking. And when they hung up the phone, I called my mom and was like, Mom, they still think I'm going to re-enlist. Like, they're crazy. And she said, well, most people do. And I just knew, like, no matter, they could have, I don't know. They even offered to give me orders back to Maryland for 5 more years so that I could stay and grow my business if I would re-enlist. But they stopped doing reenlistment bonuses for E-7. the bonuses were great for E6 and below. There were no bonuses, and honestly, a bonus wouldn't have kept me either. I was just so ready for something new and to start a new life, and to like, if I stayed, it would have been the easy route, and I would have been this like grumpy, sad person who is stressed out all the time and just not. I would have looked back when I was 50 or 70 and been like, why did I stay? Just for a paycheck or just for a pension? Like, life is, and I know it sounds woo woo or whatever, but life is about way more than retirement and a pension. Like, I want to, when I'm 70 or when I have kids that are old enough, I want to be able to tell them, like, yeah, I gave up a stable career to chase my dreams, and I don't regret a single second of it. Some days are going to be really hard, and I'm really going to struggle trying to figure out health insurance and uh hoping I make enough money to pay rent. And but you know what, it'll all be worth it, because at the end of the day I did what I want and I followed my dreams. And not, I don't think many people get to say that. um I don't have kids, I'm not married. The only living being that depends on me is my dog, and if I can't afford her $60 of dog food every 2 months, I have much bigger problems. um but yeah, that's why I left the Navy. And I have officially, today is September 15th, and September 7th was my last day. Um, yeah, so I'm like a weekend, and I've just been really busy. I don't know if it's quite set in yet. September, October in Maryland is like extremely busy. For senior portraits and weddings. So I am just very occupied with that. And then this podcast and channel is taking a lot of my time too. So I think once like November, December hits, it might set in more and I will be like bored for the first time in my life. But, I do get scared, but I still just know that this was the right decision. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that.